Why not a peace? Daenerys wanted it. They could see that. Wanted it too much. She should have marched to Astapor. Skahaz moved closer. That was before. The pit changed all. Daenerys gone. Yurkos dead. In place of one old lion, a pack of jackals. Bloodbeard, that one has no taste for peace. And there is more. Worse, Volantis has launched its fleet against us. Volantis, Selmy's sword handle tingled. We made a peace with Yunkai, not with Volantis. You are certain? Certain, the wise masters know, so do their friends, the Harpy, Resnak, Hizdar. This king will open the city gates to the volunteers when they arrive. All those Daenerys freed will be enslaved again. Even some who were never slaves will be fitted for chains. You may end your days in a fighting pit, old man. Kraz will eat your heart.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Let's talk about Skahaz, the Shave Pate, the very sus guy. He, to me, is not a trustworthy individual. I know Barristan doesn't trust him. He's, thinks that, and it's kind of the same situation. Like, Barristan reminds me so much of Ned, and that's why I'm very scared for his future. I think I want him to live. I think he's gonna live, but I wouldn't be surprised if George killed him. But I think Skahaz is in an interesting situation. He's basically been taken out publicly as the commander of the Brazen Beasts, but he's still really in control. We see that as Hizdar falls down. He holds a lot of influence. If you think about people that, if you're a slave or you're somebody, freshly that's been freed from slavery and Meereen, if you're somebody that is more probably the low class, I think Skahaz would have a lot of influence over those type of people. I think very similar to almost Varys, not Littlefinger. I think he'd be more like Varys-esque in terms of his influence. But you think about Skahaz, and the reason I think that he possibly is going to, I think, betray Barristan, especially in the next book, is based upon the way that he speaks with Barristan. Very similar to the way the Green Grace speaks to Daenerys, Skahaz is very condescending to Barristan when they talk like to do their coup, right before the chapter before. And you hear the language that Skahaz uses. Like, he uses very extreme language. He thinks that Barristan, as an old man, may be fighting in the fighting pits or might be a slave and all these things. He very much almost antagonizes Barristan as almost a form of like manipulation, playing on like his pride and things like that. And so I personally think that you have a situation where Skahaz and the Brazen Beasts and, all of their support will be the only people in control of the city. Because what's going to happen? Barristan's taking the Unsullied. He's taking out, their, loyal forces, some of the pit fighters. And he's taking them out to fight the slavers. And he's left the Skahaz to basically defend the city or be in charge while he's gone. I think that this is I understand why Barristan's doing it, but I think it's a mistake in terms of who he's leaving behind to basically control Meereen. Because Meereen at this point, even Daenerys thinks about in A Dance with Dragons, right? If they were to march to Astapor, if they were to go, help before the slavers get to Meereen, she thinks about, if she left, who would be in control? Skahaz, the Brazen Beasts, their forces. So if, again, they were to leave, he doesn't trust that. And so I think Barristan making that exact mistake is interesting because it would tie back to something that George has already foreshadowed in A Dance with Dragons. I think that Skahaz likely will close the gates of Meereen to Barristan, to the Unsullied, to all of those. I think that can make a lot of sense. Meereen already is kind of boiling over. I think that Skahaz could use that to his advantage, and he could try and more or less fix the situation, right? Because Skahaz is somebody that wants to go after the nobility, the rich. He wants to go after them much more brutally than, say, Daenerys wanted to. If you think about the two forces that are basically in fighting each other, and all of Daenerys' councils are always Skahaz and Resnak. They, in my opinion, for Daenerys' arc anyway, represent Littlefinger and Varys. They're not the main players, but they're the players that are influencing the board. They are the ones making a lot of these big moves. Now, you could look at somebody like the Green Grace being like almost a Tywin-esque figure, right? He's the one that's really in stark contrast against Daenerys. But I think there's just so much there with Skahaz that what is his fate going to be? I think likely his fate is going to be he's going to be killed. Whether that is, in the early parts of Winds of Winter, if Barristan and Tyrion, Victarion, all of our, characters can break in, get into Meereen, kill Skahaz. Whether Skahaz doesn't betray them at the Battle of Fire, but maybe waits a little bit later. Because think about something else, right? We know as an audience, based on normal storytelling, that Dany has to go to Westeros. You would assume at the very least leaving Meereen at the very end of Winds of Winter. Skahaz is not going to like that. She's leaving the people that she freed. Those people will have to govern themselves, will have to rule. Will they be able to do those things? You could see a very similar situation as to what happened in Astapor, where maybe Skahaz tries to take over after she leaves, becoming like a dictator type figure. I think either way, Skahaz will betray their cause at some point. It's just, when does George want to do so? I could see it being early in the story, because I think you're going to need some antagonistic force to a lot of our Meereen characters while Daenerys is still gone. You could kind of go two ways. You could have it be Skahaz being kind of that main antagonist, or maybe it's the Green Grace, or it could just be the Volantis fleet that is coming to Meereen at this time. A lot of things to work through. I think Meereen is a very tough plot line to kind of narrow down what is exactly going to happen. But for the most part, I think it all ends up in the same idea, that Skahaz will eventually die, whether it's by Daenerys, whether it's by, Barristan or something like that. He's taking opportunities as they come to him. I don't see him as methodical as a Varys who plans ish for decades. Yeah, I don't mean it like that when I compare him to Varys. I mean in terms of like how Varys says he's like for the people, and he uses like children and all these things. Like, I think Skahaz is would have influence with like the lower class than say somebody like Littlefinger with having the lower class like influence there.